Hi, this is the Gillmor Gang, and I'm Steve Gillmor. Welcome to a post-tab iPod. What is it called? iGrab?
iPaddle.
Thank you. An iPaddle. An iPop. It's a... I keep thinking of these drug references. I wonder why. So, you know, we all know what we're talking about or not talking about yet. And to join us, we have an illustrious cast. Robert Scoble, of course, forgot the show was at 1 o'clock on Thursdays, so he's on the phone. Welcome, Robert.
Hey, thank you for having me on.
Yeah. So I'm going to have to retransplant your eye alert so that you don't forget the next time.
Sorry.
Also joining us is Kevin Marks. Welcome, Kevin.
Hi there. Nice to see you.
From Harvard, Doc Searls.
Actually, Harvard Square. Not quite exactly in Harvard, but close enough.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Is the
Harvard? But Harvard they own everything around here, so it might as well be there.
Is the Harvard Coop still there?
Yeah, it is. It's a few hundred feet over that way.
One of my first jobs was working in the record store at the Harvard Coop.
Oh, cool.
One summer. Yeah, it was cool. Because they were records that were actually worth something at that point in time, as opposed to now. And speaking of the decay and decline of all things with the business model, the illustrious author and raconteur Nicholas Carr. Welcome, Nicholas.
Hi, Steve. Good to be with you.
Thanks for joining us. And let's start with you, since you wrote is this a New Republic piece that you wrote today?
Yesterday, yeah.
It was posted today. Can you sort of summarize your take on the iPad or whatever it's called?
Well, what I found more interesting than the iPad as a device itself was the incredible hype and anticipation that surrounded it. And I think what that reveals is that there is a yearning or a desire for a new type of personal computing device. That the old model PC is kind of yesterday's device, appropriate for the way we used to do personal computing. And we have the iPhone and the Kindle and various netbooks and all sorts of other new devices that are more geared to the way we use our computers today, which is more as a means of tapping into the net and the net's data streams than as, you know, a device to run our own software. So I think what we saw with the hype surrounding the iPad is that desire for something new, to rethink the way we do personal computing. And I think that's a trend that's been underway, obviously, for quite a while. Now the question is, you know, does the iPad, beyond the symbolic importance of the iPad, is it going to be that device? And that, to me, seems, particularly after the introduction yesterday, which didn't quite live up to the hype, not that anything could have, but it seems a long shot that we're going to see the iPad revolutionize everything the way we were told before it actually was unveiled.
Well, you know, there have been some people, and MG, why have I forgotten MG's last name? Siegler of TechCrunch wrote a piece a couple of weeks ago in preparation for this event, and he basically said that he didn't think that the iPhone was going to be anything, and so he was wrong about that, and so he's not going to make that mistake about the iPad. Now, I you know, MG is a really smart guy, but I think anybody who didn't think that the iPhone was going to be important was on some other set of drugs. So. So, I mean, I think the anticipation of this, the question then would be, is this comparable to the impact of the iPhone or not? Isn't that another way of stating the question?
Yeah. And I think, you know, the real question is the lukewarm reaction more a replay of what we saw with the iPod, which was underestimated when it was unveiled and obviously was a revolutionary device. To me, you know, the iPad is still a tablet computer, and there are some basic fundamental drawbacks of the tablet computer. One that I pointed out in my article is quite a simple one, is that you have to hold it really with two hands, and it has a touch screen, so it would be useful to have a third hand in order to manipulate the touch screen while you're holding the device with two hands, but human beings unfortunately only have two hands. And so there's something basically cumbersome, I think, about the tablet form, and I'm not sure that the iPad, for all its elegance, apparent elegance, I haven't actually seen the thing in real life, I'm not sure it solves that problem. So to me, you know, as someone who has a laptop computer and an iPod Touch, and other people have a laptop or a netbook and an iPhone or whatever, I'm not sure I see the requirement for me or for other people to go out and also have an iPad.
Doc Searls, what are your thoughts?
I don't know if it'll be as successful as the iPod or the iPhone. It looks to me like an extension of the iPhone. It's like a big brother for the iPhone. It's a great big iPod Touch of a sort. It certainly is kind of a wet dream for the publishers. You know, I mean, especially the newspapers like the New York Times, which they made a big thing out of. Suddenly, there's this new vertical silo where they can sell their stuff and show it off and the rest of it. To me, what's interesting about it is that Apple does vertical really well. They come out with a you gotta have it device and a whole lot of lock-in around it. Generally reforming industries that are really in need of it. They did it with a long time ago with the original Mac. They did it with the iPod, which, I mean, I don't think many people thought of the MP3 player industry as an industry even before the iPod came along, and now it is pretty much belonging to the iPod. They totally blew up the smartphone business. But the interesting thing to me about what happened in the smartphone business and what follows possibly here is that they redefined the entire thing vertically, and then Google comes along and moves horizontally with an open platform that where they're actually looking for competitors. They're looking for other players to operate in that space, and expanding it horizontally with a lot of openness on which anybody can build. I think this does the same thing, and I'm curious to see what Google follows up with, or there's a much lower chance, say, that Symbian would do the same thing. Not Symbian, right? I mean Nokia. I don't think Nokia is as ambitious around this, but they've gone to the trouble of buying the Symbian platform and creating the Symbian Foundation. Disclosure, I consult them, and doing Mamo and buying Trolltech for $100 million. Buying Navtech for $8 billion or whatever it was. There's a lot of possibilities there if Nokia wants to be really creative and smart here, and open up the space that Apple created vertically, and just do a lot of fun horizontal stuff where people don't have to be locked into their store. They don't have to use the privileged Apple apps that come with this thing. That's another thing. I mean, I don't like iPhoto. I don't like their calendar. I don't like a lot of the stuff that I'm sure are the only applications that'll run natively in those categories on this particular device, and that probably knocks me out of that market. You know, not that I'd buy the first model that comes out anyway, which I probably won't. But
Kevin,
to me, the interesting thing is what happens in the horizontal space after Apple's opened it up vertically.
Kevin, you're nodding about that. What is it that you agree with?
I'm sorry, I'm slightly torn by this thing, as we all were, because we're expecting a bunch of different things from it. But I'm not surprised by it. Like I said last week, this would be like the iPhone. It would be built on that OS, and it would work in that way. That does has an underlying openness, which is that it's open to the web, and that's at its core. The iPhone and the iPad are basically the web browser made manifest, made physical for you to explore, as Nick was saying. And that was the original revolution in computing. That the programmer said, this web thing, this isn't real programming. This is just writing words on the screen. How is that programming? But we've changed it in the last 10 years so that it is a place that we can build applications that we can use now. I don't have to run code directly on your computer anymore. I can run it on my server and present it to you through a browser, or I can run some code in the browser and do some on the server side. We've moved our development model from I must have complete control of the device to I will run something somewhere and put it in a form that you can view on many different devices. So I think the iPad is sort of the continuation of that line, that we have a sort of a manifestation of the web browser in physical form. And the web is the piece that even Jobs can't take proprietary. Although they've decided who can install apps on the thing, they don't decide which websites you see and which ones you can't. And if they did, then there would be outcry to that.
All right. Well, I think you're sort of sneaking in the open-closed metaphor here, and I think that what we heard from both Doc and I think by not hearing from it about it from Nick, I'm not so sure that if you've got an architecture which is going to save the publishing industry, that's necessarily has much to do with whether this is an open or closed platform. But I want to bring Robert in if he's still here, and we'll have time to be able to revisit the theory that the web is open. Robert, are you there? Okay.
Well,
somebody tweet Robert. He'll pay attention to that, I think.
So, the iPod saved the recording industry despite them, right? Basically, Jobs said,
I don't think that's true. I think that the iPod demolished the recording business.
No, it was already dying. But Jobs said, okay, I will give you the money that I make from selling songs on this. Basically, the iTunes store for music is pretty much revenue neutral for Apple, because the cost of transactions, the cost of advertising, the cost of running the infrastructure is just about paid for out of the sales, and they hand 70% straight through to the labels. And it was only by doing that and making some concessions on DRM, because that's what they wanted at the time, that he got that deal in the first place with all 5 of the labels, which was a big bunch of work. But it is now a huge part of their revenues. And
it's a huge part of their shrinking revenues. I mean,
yes.
That's like saying, a gold record these days is, you can buy one for $10.
But
I mean,
the
it's
point
not
is
made of gold anymore.
He's recreated a singles chart for them that wasn't there before. Well,
I think he's demolished the record business, and I think that the iPad is going to bring back the album business. So,
No.
Nick, what do you think?
I think Kevin's right about the iPod really and its ultimate effects. It was Napster that destroyed the record business, and it was the iPod that kind of returned at least some order to the marketplace. And so I think that's right, and I think it was, as Kevin said, it was the original digital rights management that helped give the record companies confidence to trust Jobs, and what they found is, it certainly didn't bring the recording business back to where it was before Napster, but it did salvage some revenues from that.
But I think that basically by moving to a singles market, I think it was a very good thing that it did that, because it basically recreated the situation that the Beatles came into, where they basically took the idea that the single was the product and turned it on its head and made it exclusive to songs that they would release to prime the pump for the record, like Strawberry Fields and Penny Lane came out. They were recorded at the first part of the recording. I think they were recorded second and third in the Sgt. Pepper recording sessions, but they were excluded from the album in order to build demand for it. Much like I think the iPhone was the demand builder for the iPad moving forward. So I think it's easy to sort of oversimplify the business dynamics of this series of events around the the typical discussions about open and closed, for example. I don't really think that is that.
I think this summer.
Yeah.
Sorry, I missed before I was on mute.
Who's rustling papers?
We there's some wrestling happening in this room, and I can't do anything about it. But it's gonna end in a second. In fact, it'll just ended.
Okay, great. So, Robert, did you have something to say?
Yeah, you asked is this, the disruptor that the iPhone was, and it's not on its face. I mean, the iPhone, when we first saw it, we knew it took on carriers and changed the phone business. This one, I'm looking for the company it really disrupts, and it's harder to see that this time. It's harder to come up with a straight-on disruption. But let's face it, if they sell 10%, let's say everybody who has out of all the people who have an iPhone or an iTouch, if 10% of those go and buy one of these devices, that's going to be millions of iPads sold. And that in of itself is a disruption. It brings, it firms up the metaphor that iPhone brought to the world.
I think there's a higher bar going on here because I haven't heard anybody who says that this isn't going to be a huge success. I mean, everybody says even when Dave Weiner or somebody complain about it at length, they end up saying, "But I'm going to buy one." So yeah. I think the higher bar here is some sort of magical threshold, above which this is perceived as being something revelatory or transcendent in terms of the marketplace. And honestly, I think that also is true, but I don't think that on this call that we have a consensus around that. Nick, what do you think? Do you think that this is, I mean, you hedged your comments, but net, what do you think is going to happen?
In terms of popularity?
And just in resonance with the intersection, as I think you accurately put it, of the merger of technology, of computing and media.
I think it's going to be popular in MacBook type terms. I'm not all that sure it's going to be popular on the scale of the iPhone or the iPod. And I think in order to have a huge effect on media, and particularly on the publishing industry, it really has to be a mainstream product, or something like it has to come along, which gives, because obviously the attraction to the publishing industry, among other things, is that with something like the iPad, suddenly what has been fragmented online, newspapers, magazines, where all the articles are separated from the bundled product, suddenly they have an opportunity to, with a device like an iPad, to put the bundle back together again and give access to their entire product and hopefully charge people for that product. But as I said, for that to work, it really has to become a mainstream product like the iPod and the iPhone, and I'm doubtful that will happen.
All right, so I'll counter that by saying that in doing preparation for the show today, we had both kids were staying home from school today to various ailments. So it was a sort of a slow, much like Doc just yawned about this. It was kind of a slow build. So I was doing most of my information gathering on the iPhone. And I kept thinking, well, I better get to my MacBook Air. But basically, the only thing that I really would have done differently was if I had one of these devices. So I constantly felt that this would have been the device that I would live with on an ongoing basis. And so what I think is going on here, just fundamentally, is that the iPad represents Apple's move toward what I think is building this, basically a streaming culture, as opposed to on demand or it's a real-time streaming, get the bits in your face, move on kind of architecture. And I think that by creating this device, they're going to create a wave of adoption which is going to drive what the content is, not just necessarily, as you're suggesting, some sort of publisher's imprint, a transition of the print publication to the digital publication. I think it's going to be the way that we do this kind of stuff is going to move very quickly into the realm of products that are going to be in the pocket of that kind of user experience. So I think it's going to be incredibly transformative. Doc?
Yeah, to me the significant thing here, one of the significant things is the SDK. One of the reasons that the iPhone is successful as it is that they had one target device, one really good SDK for developing toward that device, while Nokia and RIM and Windows and everybody else had a big pile of devices, and it was aversive to try and develop for all of those. Well, now they've come out with a supposedly, a really useful SDK for this thing. There is very likely to be some truly killer apps on this thing. In fact, I would bet on it that open up uses that we haven't even thought of yet. And they can bridge very nicely from the iPhone to that. I think it's going to be interesting to see what happens when iPhone apps grow wide in 2 dimensions rather than whatever they can do within the fairly small screen real estate that you have with the iPhone itself. The disappointment to me is that it's not a production device. I would have loved it if it was the kind of thing that somebody who shoots a lot of video, like you, or who I might be, had a really cool way of mashing up video live with lots of other people.
Well,
that's
why do
where
you think that it doesn't? I mean,
it's
nobody's done the server side. Nobody's
right.
done the server
if somebody
side
does,
video
that'd be great.
stuff yet.
My assumption is that it's designed primarily as a consumption device and not a production device, and that was done to satisfy Steve's need to eliminate as many ports as possible and make it as simple as possible.
All right. Well, I want to get to the port and the flash.
But on the other hand,
I think
it could be that'll happen, and that'd be great if it did.
Yeah, I don't think that it is obviated as a production device. I mean, the first thing that I was interested in that they didn't include was a camera. And, if they had, it would have really put pressure on the MacBook Air, in my opinion. So I think that they're doing that to protect, the high end of the low end of their laptop market.
Sure. I mean, in one respect, it's price support for the MacBooks, which is that suddenly $1,000 for a MacBook, I get all this extra stuff. Whereas before, $1,000 for a MacBook, that's a lot. So there's an element of that to it. But I think it is as we've said, it's the separation of the viewing from the creation. They've said, okay, this is a viewing machine primarily. Yeah, you can type on it, you can do some stuff like that if you have to, but that isn't the goal. It's because they're still assuming that people are spending more time reading than creating. I'm not sure. Obviously that will change over time, but I think that goes back to my it's the browser analogy. The browser was a thing for viewing primarily. It wasn't a thing for creating until sometime into its lifetime, when we suddenly realized we could use it for that as well, and that changed how it works. And I think it will follow that same curve.
Doc?
Yeah, no, I agree with that. I was just sending you a note that's saying I needed to go get some water and shut the door because I hear some more noise coming.
All right,
I'll
turn your
I'll
sound down. Go ahead.
Yeah.
Nick, do you think that this is not a production device? Do you think that this is a consumer device only?
I think it's geared toward consumption. I think it's essentially a media player or a multimedia player. That doesn't mean that it's always hard to know how a new device like this is going to end up being used. So I wouldn't rule out it becoming a kind of production device in one way or another, but I think it's very much a consumption device it's intended to be a consumption device. And I think Steve Jobs realizes that all media now are beginning to flow through the net, and people want some kind of flexible, portable, multimedia player geared toward the net, and I think that's the sweet spot he's aiming at, and I don't really think he or Apple thinks that it needs to be a production device. That if it succeeds, I think they see that their chance of succeeding is to make it a successful device for playing or consuming media.
Well, I think clearly they didn't have a camera. I think mostly because it would have pushed the price point to the point where nobody would have cared. And I think that's a critical. I mean, how much does a camera cost? It probably adds at a minimum $50 to the price of the actual wholesale hardware.
But isn't it kind of a bulky device to use as a camera?
Yeah, except for that we're all using similar bulky devices as cameras for this show.
As we speak.
Yeah. So
if you get the stand and you put it on, I mean, as it.
Yeah, I mean,
I don't think
they don't sell the stand anymore. So it's not like, and it goes to the
wave these around.
You get the handheld cinema verite effect, I guess. Right?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, Jason Calacanis, I think, was trying to suggest in his imagined scoop that there was going to be some sort of video conferencing capability. But, if we've already got iPhones, we already have that capability pretty much.
Right.
And the same thing with the Android. So with Nexus 1, I mean, there may be some improvement in that area. But let me sort of... Go ahead, Robert.
The problem with the video conferencing is it doesn't support multi apps, and so could you have done video conferencing and still edited a spreadsheet on this thing or something like that? And I think
but why would you want to do that?
To limit the,
I mean, you can't do that with a computer. I mean, we've got a studio that costs $20,000 in order to do that.
I get on Skype with people, and then I open up Google Docs and spreadsheets, and I'm editing with the other person while we're talking. We do that all the time to do video conferencing that's collaborative using Google Wave.
Yeah, but why would you want to do that on the phone? It doesn't seem like
this isn't a phone. It's a device you hold in front of you.
Who's to say that?
Look at.
Who's to say that this isn't going to be very possible coming in through the docking mechanism? I mean, they're going to be a whole suite.
I bet it's going to be possible. I would not be shocked if there's a bunch of accessories that either third parties or Apple itself comes out with over time.
Yeah, exactly. So let me go to the other sacred cow that I see on the internets, which is the lack of flash. I'll start with Doc. I know you don't care.
Yeah, exactly. I don't care. I think to me it's a nice to have. I'd be curious to see what Kevin thinks, because I think there's some competitive stuff with QuickTime versus Flash probably going on there in Apple's mind. Maybe they have something in mind going downstream that they think will replace Flash.
It seems a little going downstream. I mean,
in the future. But I think that it's always seemed passive aggressive to me that they don't have it, but I don't miss it. I think that I know it's not because they're committed to openness, because it's clear they're not.
It's aggressive. It's not passive at all.
Yeah, I suppose. Yeah, I suppose.
Nick, what do you think? Why do they keep Flash off?
I don't really know, but I think it's going to be. I think it will be a drawback when you start to expand the interface and move from, the iPhone or the iPod Touch to a larger screen like the iPad, which gives you a much better browsing experience. And people hate to come upon a site and see a little icon there instead of what they're supposed to see. So,
right. So
whatever you feel about flat.
Who do you think that's going to be inure to their lack of benefit? Do you think that's going to be Apple that's going to be blamed for that, or is it going to be Adobe?
I think it'll be with this device when people realize that, if they go over to their old desktop or laptop and it works fine, but they go to their iPad and it doesn't work fine, then I think Apple gets blamed for it.
Okay, I see the HTML5 brigade coming up the street. Kevin, you want to?
Would that be me?
You want to
I
run
think so.
this by?
Well, the point is that the Flash is the leading cause of crashes in browsers. That's Gruber asserted it was leading cause of crashes on the Mac, though I'm not sure how much credence to give that. But the problem is that's where we see things breaking down. We see it using a lot of CPU, particularly on the Mac side. So I can see that Apple being frustrated with it and not wanting to do that. The other half of that is that the browser is a lot more capable. Now, Flash, provides vector zoomable stuff, but guess what? You can do that in the browser now. You can, I can get this little SVG I've got here and keep zooming in and zooming in and zooming in, and that works because the browser on the iPhone supports SVG. So I can go in as far as I like and have it be smooth. The other thing that Flash provides is video, but there's a capable video playback engine in the iPhone and in these other devices too. We're starting to see that with the HTML video and audio. So it's the pieces that Flash provided that we ended up using because it was ubiquitous. Its ubiquity is now broken. It is not ubiquitous. It doesn't appear on all our phones. It doesn't appear on all our devices. So the reason to use Flash has gone away. QuickTime never achieved that ubiquity, primarily because of stupid decisions by Apple in putting pop-up ads in it. So that was a limitation. But what's happened is that it's moved down to a standards layer into something that we can implement across lots of different devices, and that makes it interesting to me.
Robert?
Steve?
Yeah, go ahead. I was going to ask you to speak.
I worked at Microsoft when Firefox came out, and I remember there was tons of web pages that Firefox wouldn't work on, banking sites and e-commerce sites and stuff like that. And slowly, they all became compatible. And why did they? Because the leading-edge users switched to Firefox and forced the companies to switch over their web pages to the newer, standards-based technologies. I think in 2 years, Flash is dead. I'm already getting used to pages that don't work because I look at the web on the iPhone a lot, and I'm already used to it. It bugs me once in a while, but not as much as it did 2 years ago, and it's certainly in 2 more years, the companies are going to figure out how to get around, the lack of a Flash player.
Yeah,
otherwise, they're going to go away because the leading-edge users are going to have these things.
I agree with that. I think Adobe's blog announcements, they've already given up. They're basically talking about how the iPad supports PDFs and some other proprietary Adobe technology. I don't see how they can sustain themselves. Well, I mean, in the face of Apple and Google conspiring together to promote HTML5, I just don't see, and Microsoft actually, joining in as well. I just don't see how Adobe is going to be able to, push the development of Flash apps back to an expensive server that is being competed against with Microsoft free products. I just don't see how they're going to be able to pull it off.
Well, we're going to find out next month because Adobe is inviting press people to an announcement of some kind. So we'll know in February what their answer is.
All right. So we don't. Flash isn't. Is not a problem. USB ports is not a problem because they're going to open up the connector architecture at the bottom of the device. So what is it that's going to stop this thing, Nick?
I don't see anything that will stop it. I actually think that the haters are actually helping Apple by defining this product. And again, if 10% of those who buy who have already bought iPhones or iTouches buy this, it's going to be a huge success.
Nick?
And that's assuming nobody else buys one.
Well, as Jobs said yesterday, Apple is shooting for the middle ground here to hit what it hopes will be a sweet spot in the middle between more traditional PCs and laptops, netbooks, and the iPhone and other smartphones. And what could, not kill the iPad, but restrict demand for it is if people don't really see there being a need for that middle device. If they are basically happy with their laptop or their netbook and their smartphone, and don't see a big enough reason to fork out a substantial amount of money for the iPad, as well as probably another monthly fee to add to all the other monthly fees that people pay for data. So whenever you get a device like this, there's obviously going to be a rush of people like you, Steve, who are going to buy it and think it's wonderful. But in order to make
come on, Nick, you're going to buy it too, aren't you?
I don't. Not. Well, as Doc said, I'm certainly not going to rush to buy it.
Well, I'm not either, because I don't want the I want the A29 one.
I mean, it's a portable device, but it's not a device you can stick in your pocket.
We've already got a device to stick in our pocket.
Right, but
and we've got a 2-year contract for it, so we're not getting rid of it.
What's the impetus for me to carry a fairly large and bulky tablet computer around with me? And if it isn't a mobile device, then
all right. So this is
what's the impetus of me to have it at home where I have another computer screen in front of me?
Okay, so here's the last refuge of this device being disrupted, which is the Kindle argument. Now, I love the Kindle, and in fact, it fits very nicely into my jacket, so I always have it with me. And in fact, I forget that I have it with me. As a matter of fact, we locked the door to the studio, so I don't have it with me because it's in my jacket in the other room. So, and the Kindle is a wonderful mechanism. You can't really get all that much of an extension out of color versions of black and white text. And despite all the noise, I think, about how this is going to presage some sort of multimedia paradise where all of the stuff that we consume is now going to suddenly be tabletized and made into, oh, wow, you can click on the video from the New York Times. I mean, that's great, except I don't care what the New York Times has to say on video. I like them because they know how to synthesize and, display and become the house organ for the White House and the Republicans. I like them as the traditional media that they are, and I'd like to be able to have it in an efficient way of being able to use it, which means that, first of all, the $4.99 price on the low end is going to hurt Kindle sales, because people are going to have to think about that. They're going to say, even if it's just a perceived value, which is, oh, it's in color, it's not black and white. People will, it'll cut into Kindle sales unless Kindle responds. Secondly, the effect on the publishing industry has already been noted, which is that it's given publishers, a way of extending the cost of the digital item by as much as 30%. So they're pretty excited about that, and they get 70% of the dollars involved. So, yes, those aspects of this device are going to be under pressure. Nick, do you have kids?
Yeah, they're older though, off at school.
Okay, so do you think that they're going to be in the market for this device?
No.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay, Doc?
Depends if they already have laptops or not.
Yeah, in my case, our older kids are like 40. The younger ones are, younger one is 13. He's a reader. He's actually interested in a Kindle or something like that. But he also likes books. He likes books for being what books are. And
I'm not talking
so he's not a good example of that.
It's not an either or.
But I think this is aimed at the TV market, or what's left of the TV market. I was thinking that Apple's been after Sony for many years, and they're after the old Sony, the Sony that made Walkman and Trinitrons and did original work and changed the world before it became an accessory to a Hollywood production company. And I think they're slowly trying to occupy that space. And I think that this is an all-purpose media device for the home and on the road. I think, and I can easily imagine seeing it in the hands of many people who are, would rather whip one of those out in an airplane, especially if it has the battery life that they're talking about, than a laptop, which is a really inconvenient thing to have when the food comes or some other thing like that. And I think that it's a bet that this is a form factor that hasn't been fully tried out yet, and deserves a shot.
I think it's a little big. I mean, my take is like as Steve was saying, this thing is a little big for the number of pixels they've got on it. They could make it a lot smaller, and that was my disappointment with it. If I'm carrying something around that's this big, I want it to be an HD screen. I want it to have lots of pixels on it.
You don't want 1024 by 768.
1024, 1024 would be a little bit bigger than this. That'd be great.
Yeah, but I apply the sort of billionaire conundrum to the size of the screen. No matter how wealthy you are, you can't get a big enough TV to have a significantly different experience than somebody who gets a 60-inch TV. And by contrast, if you've got a small device that fills your field of vision, you really can't beat it, no matter how much money you've got. So I think that's a very significant factor in the spread of this form factor.
But I'm saying I want more.
Hang on, Kevin. Go ahead, Nick.
I think one thing we haven't talked about is the possibility that this becomes a popular gaming device, particularly for interactive games. And I think, if kids are going to glom onto it, particularly the teenage audience and stuff, it probably won't be because it's a great way to read the New York Times. It'll probably be because it turns out to be a great way to play games, and that could actually turn out to be Apple's ace in the hole if it really takes off on that level.
And I agree with that, and I also think that if you look at hang on one sec, Robert. If you look at social media as essentially the same phenomenon, it's games for adults, and also kids. I mean, my teenager, she is basically, I'd say 70-80% of her computer time is social media connected, and this device will work very well, and it actually hits a price point where if we have to cough up, for a next generation laptop, I'm going to get her one of these, and maybe the keyboard. Go ahead, Robert.
Yeah, last night I had an interesting conversation that I recorded and put on my blog with my 16-year-old son. He's very skeptical. He was the first kid or the first person to be in the line at Palo Alto store for the iPhone. He was very excited before that came out. This has him not excited at all. I think this one is going to turn him after I bring it home, and after he plays with it and sees that there's games on it in particular that he wants to play. I watched his generation, and they like the iPhone, and then I look at my younger kids. My 2-year-old is just over the top about iPhones. He knows, he can't speak English, right? He can't talk to you, but he already knows how to turn on the iPhone, how to find his favorite game, and how to play a pretty sophisticated game. That generation is going to take to these kinds of plates that you use touch with in a big way.
Well, I think that's another one of these false comparisons. When people say that, it's just a big iPhone. Exactly. It's a big iPhone. What's wrong with having trained and hooked an entire set of generations? From our 9-year-old has one, and there are a lot of grandparents, and thank God I'm not yet a grandparent, who have them as well. So, I mean, this is the gestures that we've been trained on. I think the most important aspect of the Nexus 1 is that it's creating a set of comparable gestures before the door closes, and it's just all iPhone. We're going to have basically a set of comparable gestures that can move to the tablet. And I think it was Doc who said that it'd be interesting to see what Google comes up with in this space and how long it'll take.
One thing that I haven't seen a lot of the blogs talk about is what is this going to have? Is this going to have an impact on iPhone sales? Because if I was just coming into the smartphone market right now and I was looking at Android and BlackBerry and Nokia and Apple, I would be more attracted to the iPhone today than I would have been 2 days ago, because I would know that there's a future that if I buy apps for it, it's going to work somewhere else, and that Apple is spending significant money and time and energy on building a platform around the iPhone. That, to me, I think is something that we haven't seen discussed yet. I wonder what you're thinking.
Well, I think that's an excellent point. I want to. We have a hard stop today at 2. Nick has to do something, and Doc has to do something, right? So so we've got about 8 minutes left. So let's just go around and see if we can sort of pull together our thoughts based on not only what we thought coming into this call, but what we think now in terms of a sort of a consensus. And I'd like to start with Kevin.
I think the thing that the publishers are saying, oh, we can do rich media, is like I've seen this movie before. 20 years ago, when I was doing CD-ROM development, that was the publishers were like, oh, great, we can sell everything again on a shiny silver disc to people. And that lasted a little while, and then the web came along and demolished that. And what's happening here is the web has now sort of gone under this. So the book format is actually HTML. That's what's in there. So yes, you can do interesting things in the book format, but you're basically making web pages that you've just wrapped in a different thing. So for me, it's if this is the thing that can get the publishers to finally embrace that way of thinking, that mode of production, excellent. That excites me. It is getting them into the web world and out of there. Everything has to take 2 years world.
Robert?
Yeah, I'm going to buy one. First disclaimer. Today I was, and sorry about the helicopter going. Today I was sitting next to a guy who's not on Twitter and not in the social media scene and is not a early adopter, but he says he's going to buy one. And he does have an iPhone, but he says it adds on to my iPhone experience. And he explained it was his first trip not carrying a laptop. He said, I've now moved my entire life to the iPhone, and this will let me bring that iPhone experience other places. And I think that's how this is going to play out. I don't know that it was aimed at geeks like me and Kevin and you, but if people like the guy who was sitting next to me in the plane get excited about this, it's going to be a huge win for Apple and for the publishing industries.
Well, there we have it again. We've got this. Mike Arrington famously wrote a post about a friend feed saying it was the best social media application that no one would ever use. I kind of get the feeling that whatever the dings are on this product, or closed, open, whatever, that it's. I haven't heard anybody who isn't going to end up using it. I mean, Nick says he's not, but we'll get to Nick last, so he can prove me wrong. Doc Searls.
Yeah, I'm certainly not going to buy it in the short term. It's interesting to me that we got the iPhone, the first one, for my wife, after she asked for it. She said, I want one of those. And the question for me is this an invention that mothers necessity? I think it probably is. And I think the big question is what new apps are going to come along on it that are going to do that. Nick's point about gaming, I think, is a really interesting one. I think the way people use media at home, this might fit really well, and on the road as well. The interesting thing for me is there's this graph, on the vertical side, there's all this cool stuff that's going to happen that Apple's going to make possible, and then there's a horizontal world that mostly Google, but possibly Nokia and Symbian will open up as well, where they open this stuff up, not just in terms of non-proprietary, but in terms of what can be done outside of one company's store and one company's hardware. That's going to be really interesting, and I think there's a space there, and I think they know there's a space, but we'll see.
Yeah, I think the interesting noise is coming out of Amazon about how they're going to continue to that they're basically going to blow up the Kindle for the iPhone app so that it works on this, is going to open a portal into this and basically accentuate or accelerate the market dynamics of the two different models. Okay, Nick, it's your shot.
Well, I'm not, as I said, I'm not altogether convinced that the iPad, at least in this first generation, is going to revolutionize the world of computing. But I do think it's a symbol of the revolution that's gone on in computing, and I think it's a very clear indication that Apple right now has the lead in this new world and is setting the pace. And I think over the next year in particular, one very interesting thing that's going on is Apple is building a big, huge data center in North Carolina or South Carolina or somewhere. And so it's very clear that, and one other point is, I thought it was interesting the focus on iWork on the iPad yesterday in Apple's announcement, using traditional types of PC apps. And I think what we're going to see is Apple really coming at not just Microsoft, but Google over the next year. And whether or not this initial form of the iPad takes off or not and goes mainstream or not, you're going to see a lot of interesting cloud-based kind of applications and other types of services coming out from Apple. And whether it's Amazon or Google or Microsoft, they're all going to be, I think, in the mode of responding to these things rather than taking the lead themselves.
Yeah, and to illustrate your point, I saw a tweet from Michael Gartenberg just before the show started, indicating that, contrary to some of the reports that the only way to be able to get into into the device was from a PC or a Mac, that in fact they are going to. It does support over the air, including MobileMe. So I think that we haven't yet seen the kinds of cloud play that Apple is going to come up with, over the next 2.5 months.
And I certainly had a sense from watching, I want to say watching Jobs' presentation, but actually reading the live blog about it, that there was something that was left out that wasn't quite ready. And maybe I'm just reading too much into it, but it did seem that you would have thought that there would have been more of a wow factor in terms of the interface or in terms of something. And it just seemed, and even in Jobs' demeanor, that we didn't see the whole thing yet.
Well, I think that it was exciting that Jobs was healthy and engaged again. Whether or not there was some sort of slowdown, as some people have suggested, during the period of his illness or the transplant period, that might have affected the magical properties of the device. I don't buy that. I think that this company has been on track for so long, and from all indications, Tim Cook has been firing with all cylinders, and the fact that the Nexus One proves that this kind of strategic development around open standards, which in fact the iPhone and Mac and OS X are leveraging, the combination of that happening with both Apple and Google and perhaps even Microsoft bodes very well for this class of devices. So I think that this is just one more indication. I'll leave this as a cheap shot for the end of the death of RSS, because streaming has now got a device with which to be able to push out into the marketplace. And I think that's the biggest news of all of this situation. I'm Steve Gillmor. This has been the Gillmor Gang. I want to thank our sponsor, Rackspace, and Newtek, who are the builders of the fabulous TriCaster, for making this show possible in its new incarnation. I want to thank Nick so much for joining us once more, and Doc Searls for 2 shows in a row. For somebody who quit the gang, you're doing all right.
I never really quit.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah,
I got you on film now.
Whatever that means.
And Robert Scoble, wherever the hell Robert is.
Los Angeles at the Twist Up conference, seeing a bunch of cool startups.
All right, excellent. And travel safely, Robert. And Kevin Marks, thank you so much. I want to thank everybody who showed up, and especially those who didn't. We'll see you again next time. Bye-bye.